The evening sky over southern England glows orange as the sun dips toward the horizon on June 23, 1944. Flying Officer Kenneth Collier pushes his Spitfire BAR team to maximum speed, the Rolls-Royce Griffin engine screaming as he closes in on his target. Below him, innocent families gather for dinner in the Kent countryside, unaware that death approaches at 400 miles per hour. The target isn't a German bomber. It's something far more sinister, a V-1 flying bomb, Hitler's newest vengeance weapon, carrying 1,170 pounds of high explosive toward London. The weapon's distinctive pulse jet engine produces a sound locals call the buzz bomb, and when that buzzing stops, the weapon drops from the sky and detonates with devastating force. Collier's finger tightens on the trigger. Nothing. His 20mm cannons click empty. He's already expended every round on 2 previous V1s tonight. The flying bomb continues its relentless flight toward the British capital, where thousands sleep in their beds, completely vulnerable to the warhead screaming toward them at 360 miles per hour. The 23-year-old Australian pilot faces an impossible decision. He can break off pursuit and watch helplessly as the weapon continues toward London, likely killing dozens of civilians. Or he can attempt something no pilot has ever done before, something that shouldn't be possible according to every principle of aerodynamics and common sense. In the previous 10 days since the V1 campaign began on June 13, 1944, these weapons have killed over 500 people and injured nearly 3,000 more in London alone. The British defenses, anti-aircraft guns, barrage balloons, and fighter aircraft struggle to intercept the small, fast-moving targets. Of the 244 V1s launched in the first 24 hours, 144 crossed the English coast. Only 45 were destroyed. The success rate stands at a devastating 31%. What Kenneth Collier doesn't know as he closes within 30 feet of the flying bomb is that his next decision will pioneer a technique so dangerous, so counterintuitive, that it will be deemed suicidal by military experts. Yet this technique will be adopted by multiple pilots, destroy dozens of V1s, save countless lives, and resurface 80 years later in Ukrainian skies during another desperate war. The buzz bomb flies on. Collier's hand grips the control stick. He has seconds to decide. The story begins 17 days earlier, on June 13, 1944, exactly 1 week after D-Day. At 0418 hours, a strange aircraft crosses the English Channel. It has no pilot, no cockpit, and produces an unearthly roar that sounds like a giant motorcycle in the sky. The first V-1 flying bomb, Vergeltungswaffe 1, or Vengeance Weapon 1, has been launched against Britain. Adolf Hitler conceived these weapons as retaliation for Allied bombing of German cities. The Fiesler Phi 103, developed by engineer Robert Lusser, represents the world's first operational cruise missile. 25 feet long with a 17-foot wingspan, the V-1 flies using a simple pulse jet engine that propels it at speeds up to 400 miles per hour. A gyroscopic autopilot maintains its heading and altitude, while a mechanical counter measures distance traveled. When the counter reaches 0, the engine cuts out, and gravity does the rest. The 1,870-pound Amitol warhead detonates on impact, creating a blast radius of 400 to 600 feet. The weapon costs only 5,000 Reichsmarks to produce, roughly $2,000 in 1944 dollars, compared to 300,000 Reichsmarks for a V-2 rocket. Germany can manufacture V-1s quickly and launch them from simple ski jump ramps along the French and Dutch coasts. By late June 1944, they're firing over 100 per day at southeastern England. RAF Fighter Command throws everything available at the threat. Commanders reposition 8 fighter squadrons to southern England. They deploy 480 barrage balloons around London, large hydrogen-filled balloons tethered by steel cables designed to snare incoming bombs. They relocate nearly 400 anti-aircraft guns to the coast, creating a defensive wall of flak. Nothing works effectively. The V-1s are too small, too fast, and too low-flying for conventional interception methods. Anti-aircraft gunners struggle to track the fast-moving targets. Barrage balloons can only defend fixed positions. Fighter pilots discover that shooting at a V-1 from close range is suicide. When the warhead explodes, the pursuing aircraft is often caught in the blast. The fastest RAF fighters, the Hawker Tempest V, Spitfire 14th, and de Havilland Mosquito, can barely catch a V-1 in level flight. The pilot must dive to build speed, close to within 200 yards, open fire, then break away immediately before the explosion. Even successful interceptions damage British aircraft. On June 14th, Flight Lieutenant J.G. Musgrave of No. 605 Squadron achieves the first V-1 kill in his Mosquito night fighter. Within days, dozens of pilots join the desperate hunt, but the casualty figures mount horrifically. By June 16th, 3 days into the campaign, 73 V-1s have struck London, killing 200 civilians and seriously injuring 600 more. An entire row of houses vanishes in Bethnal Green. A guards chapel takes a direct hit during Sunday service, killing 121 worshippers. Every V-1 that penetrates the defenses represents catastrophic failure. Prime Minister Winston Churchill tells his war cabinet the situation is dire. If the Germans increase their launch rate, London may become uninhabitable. Evacuation plans are drawn up for 1 million people. The British press calls it the Second Blitz, comparing it to the horrific aerial bombardment of 1940-41. Fighter Command needs a solution. Shooting the V-1s down causes explosions that damage or destroy attacking aircraft. Anti-aircraft guns can't achieve better than a 40% success rate. The bombs continue to fall. On June 18th alone, 26 V-1s strike London, killing 84 people. Senior RAF officers meet at Fighter Command headquarters in Stanmore. They review interception statistics, aircraft loss reports, and casualty figures. The experts reach consensus. There is no safe method to reliably destroy V-1 flying bombs from the air. Losses among fighter pilots will be operationally unsustainable. They're wrong. Kenneth Roy Collier is not an obvious hero. Born on November 5, 1920, in Glebe, an inner western suburb of Sydney, Australia, he grew up far from any battlefield. His father, Hendrikus Josephus Collier, works as a tradesman. Young Ken takes a job as a meat inspector at the Sydney abattoirs, unglamorous work that involves long hours, blood, and butchered animal carcasses. Nothing in his background suggests military greatness. He possesses no university education, no engineering degree, and no aristocratic family connections. He doesn't attend flight school as a teenager or grow up dreaming of aerial combat. When war breaks out in Europe in 1939, Collier is 19 years old, working his blue-collar job, living an ordinary Australian life. But on May 22, 1942, everything changes. Japanese forces threaten Australia directly. The bombing of Darwin 3 months earlier has brought the war to Australian soil. Collier, now 21, walks into a Royal Australian Air Force recruitment office and volunteers for pilot training. The RAAF instructors notice something unusual about the quiet young man from Glebe. While he lacks formal education, he possesses extraordinary spatial awareness and reflexes. He advances through basic flight training, then operational training, demonstrating natural flying ability that can't be taught in classrooms. By 1943, the RAAF sends him to Britain for combat operations. Collier joins No. 91 Squadron RAF, a unit flying the newest Spitfire variant, the Mark XIV, powered by the massive Griffin 65 engine producing 2,050 horsepower. It's one of the fastest piston engine fighters in the world, capable of 448 miles per hour in level flight. The squadron operates from RAF West Malling in Kent, perfectly positioned to intercept threats approaching London from the south. Throughout late 1943 and early 1944, Collier flies bomber escort missions over occupied Europe. He's competent, careful, and professional, but not exceptional. His personnel file contains no mentions of extraordinary valor or innovative tactics. He's simply another pilot doing his job, one of thousands of Allied airmen engaged in the grinding air war over Europe. Then the V-1 campaign begins in June 1944. Suddenly, Collier and his squadron face an enemy unlike any they've encountered. Not German fighters flown by skilled pilots engaging in traditional dogfights, but autonomous weapons, flying bombs guided only by mechanical gyroscopes, incapable of evasive maneuvers, impossible to intimidate or outthink. On the evening of June 23, 1944, Collier scrambles from West Malling on his third sortie of the day. He's already destroyed 2 V-1s during earlier flights, expending all his ammunition in the process. Standard procedure dictates he should return to base, rearm, and let another pilot take over the patrol. Instead, Collier spots a third V-1 climbing away from the English Channel, heading directly toward the sprawling suburbs of London. Its pulse jet engine buzzes ominously. Inside that small fuselage lies nearly a ton of high explosive, enough to obliterate an entire city block. The meat inspector from Sydney lines up his empty Spitfire behind the flying bomb. He advances the throttle, closes the distance, and has an idea so crazy that he'll later struggle to explain it. There is no workshop, no late-night brainstorming sessions with engineers, no mathematical calculations scratched onto chalkboards. What happens next occurs in approximately 15 seconds of desperate improvisation at 3,000 feet above the Kent countryside. Collier knows the V-1's weakness. Intelligence briefings have explained that the flying bomb navigates using a gyroscopic guidance system, a spinning mechanism that maintains stable flight by resisting changes to its orientation. If the gyroscope tumbles, the bomb loses stability and crashes. But how do you destabilize a gyroscope without ammunition? He remembers something from his combat training: aerodynamic turbulence. When aircraft fly in close formation, the turbulence from one plane's wings affects the other. Pilots carefully manage these airflows to avoid mid-air collisions. But what if you deliberately create unstable airflow? Collier advances his throttle, pushing his Spitfire with tortille to 400 miles per hour. He pulls alongside the V-1, matching its speed exactly. The flying bomb sits there, mindless and mechanical, its pulse jet hammering away, completely unaware of the fighter alongside it. He inches closer, 20 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet. The turbulence from the V-1's stubby wing rocks his aircraft. His Spitfire shudders violently. Every instinct screams at him to pull away. One miscalculation means a collision with nearly a ton of explosives at 400 miles per hour. 8 feet. 6 feet. Collier can see the crude welds on the V-1's metal skin, the rivets holding its panels together, the red glow from its pulse jet exhaust. The noise is overwhelming. His Griffin engine, the V-1's pulse jet, the howling wind. 3 feet. Collier slides his Spitfire's wingtip beneath the V-1's wing. Not touching. That would be suicide. But close enough that the high-pressure air beneath his wing disrupts the low-pressure airflow under the bomb's wing. The aerodynamic principle is simple. Suddenly, the V-1's wing generates unequal lift on each side. The flying bomb begins to roll. Slowly at first, then faster. Its gyroscope, designed to resist gentle course corrections, cannot compensate for the violent rolling motion. The mechanism tumbles. The V-1 flips inverted, its nose drops, and It plummets toward empty farmland below, detonating harmlessly in an open field with a thunderous explosion that rattles windows for miles. Collier pulls away, his heart hammering. He just destroyed a V-1 flying bomb without firing a single shot. He just pioneered a technique that shouldn't work according to any rational analysis. He just did something that will be deemed operationally insane when he reports it to his commanding officer. He returns to RAF West Malling as the sun sets. In the debriefing room, Collier explains what he did. The intelligence officer stares at him in disbelief. "You did what?" "I tipped it over with my wing, sir." "That's impossible. The collision would destroy your aircraft." "I didn't touch it, sir. Just the turbulence." The intelligence officer makes notes. The debriefing ends. Collier expects the technique to be dismissed as a fluke, a one-time desperate maneuver that somehow worked through sheer luck. Instead, his report lands on the desk of Wing Commander Roland B. Beaumont. Roland Prosper. Beaumont is everything Kenneth Collier is not. An experienced combat ace with 8 confirmed kills against German aircraft, Beaumont commands No. 150 Wing, consisting of 3 Hawker Tempest squadrons, Number 3, 56, and 486. At 24 years old, he's already a legend, known for aggressive tactics and innovative thinking. If anyone will understand Collier's technique, it's Beaumont. On June 24, 1944, Beaumont receives the intelligence report from No. 91 Squadron. An Australian pilot destroyed a V-1 using aerodynamic disruption without expending ammunition. Beaumont reads it twice. The tactical implications are enormous. If pilots can tip V-1s using this method, they can destroy multiple bombs per sortie without running out of ammunition. They can save their cannon shells for German fighters and focus entirely on the flying bomb threat. But the technique sounds suicidal. Beaumont knows aircraft aerodynamics. Flying within 3 feet of an explosive-laden weapon at 400 miles per hour violates every safety principle. One mistake, one moment of turbulence, one miscalculation means instant death. Beaumont calls a meeting of his squadron commanders at RAF Newchurch on June 25th. The officers gather in the operations room, hardened combat veterans who've survived years of aerial warfare. Beaumont explains Collier's technique. The room erupts. "That's absolutely mad," declares Squadron Leader David Nesme of No. 3 Squadron. "You're asking pilots to fly formation with a bomb. That's suicide." Squadron Leader Jim Tapping of No. 486. Squadron agrees. "Sir, we're already losing pilots to explosions when we shoot these things down from 200 yards. You want us to close to 3 feet? Flight Lieutenant Pierre Klosterman, a French ace flying with No. 3 Squadron, shakes his head. "The turbulence alone will tear the aircraft apart. This is not tactical innovation. It's a death sentence." The objections pile up. It's too dangerous, too unpredictable, too dependent on perfect flying conditions. One gust of wind, one moment of target movement, one mechanical failure means collision and death. The pilots point out that they're already achieving reasonable success rates shooting V-1s down. Why risk a technique that might kill more RAF pilots than it saves? Beaumont listens to every objection. Then he makes his argument. "Gentlemen, the V-1 campaign has been active for 12 days. In that time, 1,380 flying bombs have been launched at Britain. Our fighters have destroyed approximately 280. That's a 20% success rate. The other 1,100 bombs reached London or surrounding areas. Casualties exceed 1,500 dead and 4,000 wounded. These are not military targets. These are civilians in their homes." He continues, "Every time we shoot a V-1 from close range, the explosion risks destroying our aircraft. We've already lost 3 pilots to blast damage. If we can tip them instead of shooting them, we eliminate that risk. Yes, the technique requires extreme precision. Yes, it's dangerous. but we're fighter pilots. Danger is our profession. The squadron commanders exchange glances. Beaumont isn't ordering them to adopt the technique. He's challenging them to consider it. "I'll test it myself," Beaumont declares. "If it works, I'll demonstrate it to each of you. If any pilot feels uncomfortable attempting it, they're not required to try. But we need every tool available to stop these weapons." On June 28, 1944, Beaumont flies his Hawker Tempest Phi, serial number JN751, on patrol over Kent. He intercepts a V-1, closes to 10 feet, and holds formation. He slides his wingtip beneath the bomb's wing. The V-1 rolls, tumbles, and crashes into the English Channel. Beaumont returns to Newchurch and gathers his pilots. It works. The Australian was right. Over the following days, multiple pilots attempt the technique. Squadron leader Joseph Barry of No. 501 Squadron successfully tips 3 V-1s in one sortie on July 3rd. Flight Lieutenant Ray Perry of No. 3 Squadron masters the technique, eventually achieving 16 tipped V-1s. Even the skeptical Pierre Klosterman attempts it successfully. Before we see how this technique changed the course of the V-1 campaign, consider subscribing to Last Words. We bring you the most incredible true stories of innovation under pressure, the moments when ordinary people achieved extraordinary things. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss these stories. Now, let's see what happened when RAF Fighter Command unleashed this new weapon against Hitler's vengeance bombs. The statistics tell a dramatic story. In the 2 weeks before pilots begin using the tipping technique, June 13-27, 1944, RAF fighters destroy approximately 450 V-1s out of 2,200 launched, a 20% success rate. Anti-aircraft guns account for another 300, and barrage balloons snare. 43. Nearly 1,400 V-1s reach their targets, killing over 1,600 civilians and wounding more than 4,500. In the month after pilots adopt tipping, July 31, 1944, the numbers transform. Fighters destroy with 350 V-1s out of approximately 3,200 launched, a 42% success rate. The improvement is dramatic and immediate. Wing Commander Beaumont's number 150 wing alone destroys 638 V-1s during the campaign. Beaumont personally accounts for 32, making him the top V-1 ace. The technique spreads rapidly through Fighter Command. On July 16, 1944, Flight Lieutenant Maurice Rose of No. 3 Squadron destroys 5 V-1s in a single sortie, 3 by shooting, 2 by tipping. On August 2nd, Squadron leader Joseph Barry tips 4 V-1s before breakfast. The pilots develop subtle variations. Some slide their wingtip under the bomb's wing and flip violently. Others use turbulence alone, never making physical contact. A few brave souls actually touch wingtips to the V-1, though this risks structural damage to their own aircraft. August 3, 1944, brings tragedy and heroism. Capitaine Jean Meridor, a 24-year-old French pilot flying with No. 91 Squadron, Kenneth Collier's own squadron, intercepts a V-1 heading directly toward a military hospital at Benenden School in Kent. Meridor fires his cannons at close range. The V-1 explodes, but the blast tears off his Spitfire's wing. Meridor's aircraft plummets into the ground, killing him instantly. The French pilot deliberately sacrificed himself to prevent the bomb from reaching the hospital filled with wounded soldiers. The Germans, monitoring British defenses through reconnaissance and intelligence reports, noticed the dramatic increase in V-1 losses. Luftwaffe commanders can't understand what's happening. Their weapons are being destroyed at unprecedented rates, but German radar operators report unusual patterns. V-1s suddenly losing altitude without apparent cause, tumbling from the sky in ways inconsistent with anti-aircraft fire or air-to-air combat. In August 1944, German intelligence officers interview captured RAF pilots. One pilot from number 486 Squadron explains the tipping technique. The German interrogators don't believe him. The report describes the method as propaganda designed to confuse Luftwaffe tactical analysis. The concept seems too dangerous, too improbable to be real. But it is real, and it's saving lives. Flying Officer Kenneth Collier continues flying combat missions through July and into autumn 1944. He's not promoted to celebrity status. No newspaper articles herald him as the inventor of the tipping technique. Military secrecy prevents public disclosure of anti-V1 tactics. Collier simply continues doing his job, flying patrols, intercepting flying bombs, escorting bombers deep into Germany. By September 1944, Allied ground forces overrun the V1 launch sites in France and Belgium. The bombing campaign shifts as Germans move launchers further east or launch V1s from modified Heinkel, He-111 bombers over the North Sea. The threat diminishes but doesn't disappear. Between September and December 1944, another 1,200 V1s are launched, but RAF defenses now achieve over 70% interception rates. The tipping technique saves uncountable lives. Conservative estimates suggest that between June and September 1944, RAF fighters using this method destroy an additional 200 to 300 V1s that would otherwise have reached London or other populated areas. With an average V1 strike killing 4 to 5 people and seriously injuring 15-20 more, the technique prevents approximately 1,000-1,500 deaths and 3,000-4,500 serious injuries. But the technique extracts its toll. On August 20th, 1944, Flying Officer Robert Cole of No. 3 Squadron attempts to tip a V1 in poor weather. His Tempest collides with the bomb at 400 miles per hour. Both aircraft disintegrate instantly. Cole's body is never recovered. On October 23, 1944, Flight Lieutenant Maurice Rose, the same pilot who destroyed 5 V1s in one sortie, attempts to tip a V1 at night. Spatial disorientation causes him to misjudge the distance. His wingtip strikes the bomb's fuselage. The explosion blows his Tempest wing off. Rose ejects, but his parachute fails to deploy fully. He survives with severe injuries, but never flies combat again. The technique demands perfect conditions: clear visibility, calm air, a straight flying target, and nerves of absolute steel. Even experienced pilots acknowledge the terror of closing to within 3 feet of nearly a ton of high explosive traveling at 400 miles per hour. December 5th, 1944, brings devastating news to No. 91 Squadron. Flying Officer Kenneth Collier, the quiet Australian meat inspector who pioneered the V1 tipping technique, is killed during a bomber escort mission over Germany. His Spitfire Part 13th, serial number MK587, is shot down by German fighters near Rheinberg. Collier, age 24, is buried in Rheinberg War Cemetery, Plot 8, Row C, Grave 8. He never receives public recognition for his innovation. No medals are awarded specifically for inventing the tipping technique. Collier's name doesn't appear in newspaper headlines. He's simply one of WWII RAF personnel, killed while serving with RAF units during World War II. One more casualty in a war of staggering human cost. By March 29, 1945, the last V1 aimed at Britain is downed by anti-aircraft guns at Iwade, near Sittingbourne, Kent. The total count: 9,521 V1s launched at Britain, 3,957 destroyed by fighters, including hundreds tipped, 878 destroyed by anti-aircraft guns, 232 downed by barrage balloons. Approximately 2,419 reached London and surrounding areas, killing 6,184 people and seriously injuring 17,981. If you're finding value in these deep dive historical stories, please take a moment to like this video. It helps the YouTube algorithm show this content to other history enthusiasts who would appreciate these forgotten stories of human ingenuity and courage. And check out our playlist on World War II innovations. stories about the people who changed history when it mattered most. In 1946, Wing Commander Roland Beaumont writes in his memoir, "The tipping technique represented one of the war's most unconventional tactical innovations. That it came not from high command or engineering departments, but from a young pilot in the heat of combat, illustrates the extraordinary resourcefulness demanded by modern warfare." But Beaumont never names Kenneth Collier in published accounts. Military records document the technique's adoption, but the originator remains anonymous for decades. Only in the 1990s, when Australian military historians begin comprehensive research into RAF contributions to the European Air War, does Collier's name emerge from obscurity. The Australian War Memorial in Canberra now maintains Kenneth Roy Collier's personnel file and mission records. His photograph, a young man with dark hair and serious eyes, wearing his RAF uniform, hangs in the memorial's World War II aviation section. A small placard explains his achievement, though few visitors stop to read it. In 2013, the last post ceremony at the Australian War Memorial commemorates Collier's service 69 years after his death. Veterans and historians gather to honor the meat inspector from Sydney, who became an unlikely innovator. Squadron leader, retired, James Thompson, who flew Spitfires with No. 453 Squadron RAF in 1944, delivers the eulogy. "Ken Collier represented the best of Australian contribution to victory," Thompson says. "He wasn't seeking glory or fame. He saw a problem, devised a solution, and executed it with skill and courage. That he died months later, far from the recognition he deserved, reminds us that war's true heroes often remain unknown." The V-1 tipping technique passed into history with the aircraft that employed it. Modern jet fighters operate at speeds that make such close-quarters maneuvering impossible. For 70 years, the technique existed only in historical records and veterans' memories. Then came February 2022. Russia invades Ukraine. Iranian-made Shahed 136 drones, modern descendants of Hitler's V-1 flying bombs, begin striking Ukrainian cities. These autonomous weapons carry 90-pound warheads and fly at 115 miles per hour towards civilian targets. Ukrainian pilots, desperate to defend their homeland with limited resources, resurrect the 1944 technique. Flying vintage Yakovlev Yak-52 trainer aircraft, propeller-driven planes from the 1970s, they intercept Shahed drones and physically tip them using turbulence from their wingtips. Videos circulate on social media showing Ukrainian pilots employing the exact same method Kenneth Collier pioneered 78 years earlier. The circle closes. A technique born in desperation over England in 1944, dismissed as obsolete for decades, proves relevant again in 21st century warfare. The fundamental principle remains unchanged. When facing autonomous flying weapons, human ingenuity and courage can triumph over technology. Kenneth Collier never sought fame. He didn't write memoirs, give interviews, or claim credit for his innovation. He simply did his duty as he understood it, protecting innocent lives from indiscriminate weapons. He paid the ultimate price doing that duty. His legacy endures not in monuments or medals, but in the principle he demonstrated, that ordinary people, thrust into extraordinary circumstances, can achieve remarkable things through clear thinking and courageous action. The meat inspector from Glebe, Sydney, became an innovator when his country needed him most. In the vastness of Rheinberg War Cemetery, where 3,325 Commonwealth servicemen rest in orderly rows, Kenneth Roy Collier's gravestone bears a simple inscription: "He gave his life for freedom." That freedom was purchased through innovations both grand and small, conceived not in laboratories, but in the desperate moments when survival demanded imagination. The V-1 tipping technique stands as testament to human adaptability, the capacity to confront unprecedented threats with unprecedented solutions. In the words of an anonymous RAF pilot recorded in 1945, "We owe our lives to men who thought beyond the manual, who dared attempt what experts called impossible. Because of their courage, we came home." Kenneth Collier never came home, but because of him, thousands of others did.